Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about the ultra scale and the Phrygian Dominant, and more specifically how to play them in context of a jazz tune. So I have written out some jazz changes here, just a little chord sequence that I made up. You might want to take a screenshot of that or pause your video and write them down because we're going to be using them. So before we kind of get into it, let's talk about the four ways to think of soloing over changes. The first way is arpeggios. Learn the arpeggios of each chord and figure out how to interlock them as they move through the changes to create a melody or solo. You could also, the second way is to think of a different scale for each chord. Now in this case you could use altered scales for these three chords, but we're going to use both the altered for the B7 and the dominant minor, or the Phrygian Dominant as it's also called, for the other chords. There's also, if this song had a melody, a great way would be to work on embellishing the melody, but to do that you'd also know kind of what notes you can embellish with. If you couldn't just use your ear, but that's a whole nother topic. And the fourth way is what we're going to talk about today, is thinking of these chords in context of the key. So this sequence is in the key of C, and we can use the C major scale for several chords. I'll flash this one more time here. For the first chord, the C, and the last three chords, D minor 7, G7, C, they're all in the key of C. So you can just obviously use the C major scale for those chords. For the other chords, let's focus first on the B7. In the key of C, a B7 chord, the ultra scale is a very common choice. It's the choice that fits the key the best. When talking about the ultra scale, I've seen at least maybe in the world of YouTube, 50% of teachers that or people that talk about the ultra scale talk about it as in the melodic minor, thinking of a step above melodic minor. So that's a very common practice. I should say, be more specific, a semitone. So a lot of people would say, oh, B7 altered, that's C melodic minor, and that's what you play for that chord. So that's a great way to look at it. What we're going to do is think, okay, what is actually C melodic minor? It's actually just a C major scale with a flat third. You just flatten the third step. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write flat 3 over the B7. If you've written these out on a piece of paper, you can do the same thing. We'll come back to why later. So for the C chord, it's a C major scale. For the B7, we're going to flatten the third step of the C major scale to get a B altered scale. The next chord is the E7, then comes the A7. For those two chords, we're going to use the dominant minor or Phrygian Dominant scale. So you could also use the altered, but I prefer the dominant minor scale. So if we're going to think about those in the context of the C major scale, if you sharpen the fifth step, which is the G sharp, sharp 5, sharpen the fifth step of the G major scale, that actually gives you the E dominant minor or Phrygian Dominant scale. So I'm going to write a sharp 5 over the E7. Same thing with the A7. How does that fit into the C major scale? If you sharpen the first and flatten the seventh step of the C major scale, you get the A Phrygian Dominant. I usually say dominant minor, but whatever. And then, like I said, over the last three chords, it's straight from the C major scale. So instead of having several scales to think about, we actually just have 4 notes that we need to change, or what I like to call deviate, to make those work. So what I'm going to do now, I just played those chords into a looper here. I use the Boss looper. Actually, I don't know what is it. It's the Boss Loop Station RC2. It's getting to be vintage soon. So I just played those chords into the looper, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play up and down the C major scale. I should maybe show you the C major scale just in case. So here is the C major scale. Those are the seven notes of the C major scale. So So what I'm going to do is just play up and down. I'm actually not even going to use all the notes. I'm mostly just going to use these top ones here. And I'm just going to play up and down. But when I reach the third step of the C major scale, when the B7 hits, I'm going to hit the flat third. So instead of this, I'm going to play first, second, flat third. And that's going to make that all of a sudden be a B altered scale. When I hit the E7, I'm going to hit the sharp 5 instead of the fifth step of the scale. So 1, 7, 6, 5, I'm going to hit the sharp 5th. And when it comes to the A7, I'm going to hit the sharp 1 of the root and the flat 7. And then the rest, like I said, is the C major scale. So like I said, I'm just going to play up and down those few notes there and show you how just changing one little note here and there is going to make it fit the, make the scale fit the chords. So, as you can hear, like I said, I just played up and down, but you could obviously hear that those notes fit the chords much better than if I just played a C major scale. There would have been quite a few clashes there. So thinking of just altering the scale of the key slightly to fit the chords may be a better way for you to think about as a nice first step instead of thinking about difficult, several different scales or several different arpeggios. This is a nice way to get you started and playing solos in jazz. Not that that was a solo, obviously. Now that you know the notes, or when you can play the notes, then you can start to think about different note order, different rhythm, and different stuff to start making an improvised solo. If this way of improvising sounds interesting to you, you can go check out the Jazz Hack website at jazz-hack.com. There's loads of free stuff about soloing, information about chords, and about how to play melodies over loads of jazz standards. So hopefully there's some stuff there you find interesting, and happy jamming!